Okay, this is Sprint 100 review. And let's see, today I'll be doing these statistics. Dan's going to do UI, Adam providers, Tina automate, Joe platform, Alberto REST API, Chris on documentation. So there were 257 PRs across the 96 repos. And this is always, it always appears to be pretty much the same kind of share across each of the repos or the and as you can see, we dipped a little bit this this sprint, but considering it's the end of the year, I'm not sure it's that surprising.
There's some Thanksgiving holiday involved as well.
Yeah. Oh, you want to take over?
Sure.
Okay.
On the distribution of the pull requests, so we have 37%, a little over a third were bugs, 16% documentation, and the rest sprinkled around in tech debt tests and enhancements. So we're in definite stabilization phase here. Next slide. As to the health of the repos, most of them remain unchanged except for the classic UI repo with significant changes, significant improvements in code smells and other issues. Next slide. To the UI.
Dan, are you there?
Yeah, I had to find the button. All right. Here we go. Let's see. So there's the total PR count, but you can see a lot of bug fixes for Hammer release. Also, quite a bit of work in tech debt and tests, and I'll talk about that in a minute. On the bug side, in the Ops UI, cloud volume creation was just really messed up, so that was a lot of fixes in that area to make it work. Put back in the email validation for schedule and alert forms. Also some RBAC work there where you could actually see a list of storages but not see the actual details of them if you set up RBAC properly, and that was allowing that to happen. Shouldn't have. Next one I just added because it says God's custom buttons. Kind of cool, but those are generic object definitions. In the V2V area, they disabled the edit button when the mappings are broken. There were some links that weren't correct in the product documentation area, and when they had to add public networks in when you're doing a mapping for editing. In the service UI, quite a few fixes. We're actually looking at some stuff that QE found. A couple translation issues, no confirmation messages, or actually it was an incorrect confirmation message on the service getting retired. The documentation being dynamically configured that was not working properly, and some of the custom buttons when you would only show the button name when it said display on the button. Let's see, next slide. There we go. Some minor enhancements in V2V, and that's about all that was enhanced in this sprint. They added a warning to the mapping wizard. You didn't have any conversion hosts. And now they're waiting for available conversion hosts in the process, I think, instead of timing, instead of just bailing out. And for the Centennial Sprint, we have some guest speakers to talk about the UI test speed up that was done. Major performance improvements. Martin P is going to talk about that. And we have the debut of the data-driven forms that Martin M is going to discuss. And I'll let these guys at it. Martin?
Okay. So over the Thanksgiving, we team up with Martin H and David and decided to make the tests run actually fast. Well, it was partly inspired by the fact that we have some breakages from other repositories and we would like the other repositories to run the UI tests. So we did a number of improvements in several areas that includes test setup, package installation, view rendering, and database entity creation. Well, you can see the result on the slide. On the top, you can see how the tests run today, and the bottom half is how the tests did run 2 weeks ago. So you can see that we basically cut the length of test execution by half. Also, what we achieved should be a better experience for people actually running UI tests, because we figured why each time you run a test that uses the render view call, you actually have to wait for 3 minutes at some point. So we fixed that also. Next slide. So here you can see the comparison of the 25 slowest tests today with the 25 slowest tests running 2 weeks ago. On the left side, you can see that we have one test running basically 3 minutes, and we have 2 tests running over 30 seconds, with number of tests running more than 3 seconds. On the right side, you see what it looks like today. We have just 1 test running over 3 seconds, and about 10 tests running over 1 second, and all these tests basically perform HTTP request or more than 1 HTTP request. So that's all from me. On to Martin M. Next slide.
Well, yes, thanks. So in the past couple of weeks, I've been working hard on something called data-driven forms, and I think this week we actually started using it. So I'd like to tell you something about it. So basically, a long time ago, we had this idea that we are going to render all our forms using something called form player. That means we are going to take some data, normalized data, some JSON, YAML, whatever. We are going to put it inside some component, and it will actually render our UI. So we've actually done it. There was several reasons why we should do it. So first of them was much less code to write. There were also some issues with consistencies between multiple forms in UI, so that's going to be solved as well. There is also easier maintenance of the code, and also easier bug fixing and future improvements to the forms. As we know, there is a lot of buzz about PF4. Some people are actually working on ManageIQ. They are trying to apply the PF4 styles to the UI. If we are going to use the data-driven forms, basically the switch between buttonfly 3, 4, whatever is going to be instantaneous. Next slide, please. So there is a very simple demo of how it looks like. On the left picture, you can see the actual schema that's being used, and on the right picture, there's an example of a form with buttonfly form styles. The data format has been designed specifically with React in mind, so the rendering cycles are very quick, and there is a very good performance. Also, because some other teams are using some other definitions, we know about one team in science who is using Mozilla schema definition, and we've got our own format for the dialog player. So there is an internal converter which will take these different formats and converts them into the internal representation. In the future, if somebody else will come with some different format, we can easily write some converter and use the same component without the requirement of writing additional form components or whatever else. Next slide, please. So yes, I think last week or this week we started actually mapping the forms in ManageIQ so that we can figure out how much effort we're going to have to put into migrating to the data forms. In the first analysis, we actually found out that roughly 40% of all the forms can be migrated right now without anything with the current implementation. About 30% needs just some simple components to be implemented. Most of them are either missing from Buttonfly 3 or are not compatible with the ManageIQ UI style. So it's not hard. Somebody's just going to have to sit down and write them. And the rest of them, there are some forms with unique functionalities and some unique components that are a bit more complex. Again, it's not a problem to migrate those forms, but it will take probably a bit more time. As I said, there is internal schema conversion between the ManageIQ schema and the Mozilla JSON schema. And also these forms are very easily customizable. If you missed some component, you can just define it, add it to the renderer you don't need to make any PRs to the actual library. You can just define it in your application. If you are interested, there is an online demo. There is also a link to the repos, and there is initial documentation. It all needs a bit of work. It's very fresh. But if you are interested, you can check it out. If you want, you can also contribute to that repositories. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. We'll move on to Adam.
All right, thanks, Dan. So this sprint, we had a couple of great enhancements and bug fixes from a number of providers. Next slide. OpenStack had 10 PRs merged, which was great. Kubernetes also had 7 and VMware 6. So those providers had a good bit of PRs merged this sprint. Next slide. On the Kubernetes side, we added the ability to set an event blacklist in the Kubernetes and OpenShift providers. This is similar to how other providers allow you to filter on event types. This wasn't being done in Kubernetes or OpenShift because they had actually an event whitelist, which is different than the rest of the types of event catchers. And now you have the ability to filter based on the Kubernetes event type, which is it was leading to a good amount of bloat in the event streams table for certain customers on certain event types. So now that's in line with the rest of the providers. And Yakov changed the value for the memory for pods and nodes from usage to working set. What was happening was the Hawkular value for usage was including cached memory, so it really wasn't very useful. And now working set is basically just the in-use memory. So that value is going to be a lot more useful for Kubernetes and OpenShift metrics. On the VMware side, we refactored how we archive or orphan VMs. Previously, this was done in the event handler. We would key off of the type of event and call a method from the automate worker. There was a race condition between the automate worker and the refresh worker, where automate would mark VM as archived, and refresh would bring it back to orphaned. And so now that's all done as part of the disconnect inventory method when the VM is disconnected from the refresh worker. So that removes that race condition. Next slide. On the OpenStack side, I think last sprint or 2 sprints ago, they added the ability to do some parallel inventory collection. And in this sprint, they added the ability to just adjust the thread count on the thread pool while doing parallel refresh. They also fixed collection of Panko events so that we could get those from all OpenStack tenants. And they also added the ability to reconnect EMS events that have been collected before an undercloud host was added to inventory. This is something that we've had for a long time with VMs, and now OpenStack has added this for hosts as well. On the Lenovo side, they added generic notifications being sent for their Ansible runner operations. And they also fixed an issue where the port UUID wasn't unique when trying to link up ports between physical servers and physical switches. And that's it. Over to Tina for Automate.
Thanks, Adam. Good morning. During the holiday, we had a lighter sprint than usual. DrewU resolved the service bundle linking issue where sub-services were not getting properly linked to the top-level service. Some symptoms of this issue include bundled services not showing all the resources and retirement not being able to completely retire the service bundle. Drew made a change to call for the retirement of sub-service service resources separately from the bundled service resources. The service retirement result is the same, just that it'd be more forgiving of service bundle linking issues. And finally, Drew resolved an issue where Ansible Playbook custom buttons were not properly creating custom button events. That's it for Automate. Next slide, and over to Joe.
Thank you, Tina. This sprint, the platform team merged 8 PRs. This is a bit off from what we usually accomplish. Others have mentioned it's possibly because of the U.S. holiday, and we also had a couple of team members on vacation. A summary of the PRs that were merged is as follows. Julian carried the torch forward, continuing the quest to move us to Rails 5.1 by making 3 PRs in that effort. For enhancements, we continue to make improvements to our test infrastructure. This sprint Brandon made a couple of PRs to move this effort forward. For bug fixes, Greg T. and Keenan paired up to fix a blocker where all requested information was not being rolled up to the requesting region. Keenan made a PR to ensure pools are now showing up on the host detail page, and Keenan made another PR to ensure reports now properly generate SQL includes even when include is not defined. And without a pause, we'll hand it off to Alberto for the rest status.
Alberto?
I guess we do have a pause on the rest status.
Okay, he might be tied up, so I can't really speak to this, but there's the details. He just usually walks through this, so these will be up on SlideShare, so you can review that or ping him later on. All right, next. Chris, you're up.
For documentation is we had APRs merged. All of them were enhancements, and the highlights are we added the infrastructure provider REST API subcollection, put some updates in there regarding a new section that addresses changes in Ruby or Rails that might affect Automate code. And in the IMS guide, there's been a new procedure added on canceling migrations. That's it.
John, I can talk quick about that API slide if you want. This is Dan.
Go ahead, Dan. If you can, John, if you can roll back to that.
Sure. Which one? The API? Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Since I'm the one that added it. This is part of the V2V effort. For conversion hosts, there was no REST API interface. There were no endpoints exposed, so I added them. So now we have basic CRUD operations for conversion hosts as well as tagging support, since it is a taggable resource. Still working on actually enabling or disabling it. That's it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Just one note to add on this V2V conversion host. This is James. That the backend actually is ready to take in a request to create a conversion host enablement or disablement task. In the next release, Dan would change the API to hook up that request into the MIQ queue to allow the backend to do async enabling of the conversion host, which would involve download packages onto that conversion host and installing, configuring it. Yep, that's it.
Thanks, James.
Awesome. Thanks, James.
Yep.
All right. So with that brings Sprint 100 to a close, and we're actually already have started on Sprint 101, and we'll be back in 2 weeks to do a review of that. So thanks to everyone for making Sprint 100 happen, and looking forward to the first post-centennial sprint. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.